It's a bit difficult because research is limited. I mean, written research is obviously abundant because he's a historical character, but that's going to be filtered or it'll be processed through gossips or historians, that sort of thing. So in terms of actually trying to enter into the experience of being a member of a royal family is almost impossible. I mean, it's a simple leap of the imagination. We were very fortunate to have some extraordinary information in the form of the private diaries of the speech therapist Lionel Logue. And these were unearthed about, I think, a couple of months before we started shooting. And it gave us time to adjust the script accordingly and find these true gems, I think, of dialogue and moments exchanged between these two men that were completely private. They weren't part of the confidential speech therapy sessions, but they were not heard by anyone until we read them. It was like the Rosetta Stone or something. And so we were able to decode their relationship. And a lot of it conformed very well to what we already had and what David Seidler had already written speculatively. But it taught us that there was a warmth and a wit and a comfort in the relationship between the two men.
I have received
Perhaps he should change jobs.
And what of my husband with a king?
Now, you're known for having such a rich, melodious voice. What was it like having this stripped from you? Did it change your approach to your performance at all?
We weren't studying only the stammer, of course, to focus on the voice is right, and when you look at this, because it's not just about that. Tom Hooper was very concerned that we all inhabited the way that people spoke then, people of this particular class, in this particular place, at this particular time. And we Brits get very lazy about that when we do periods of recent history. We forget how much our use of language has changed. It was more clipped, it was tighter, and I think this wasn't just in order to give the film a loose flavour of authenticity. It was actually very, very important information about what it was like to grow up in that world. And the dialect coach, I mean, it was quite surreal for me to work with a dialect coach for an English patrician accent. And the person who had it nailed first was Guy Pearce. And when he arrived, I realized that we've all got to raise our game because he sounds far more like an authentic English member of the royal family in 1930 odd than I did. So I realized there was a long way to go, and we worked quite hard on what the coach pointed out was a tightness, and that actually this was expressive of a kind of rigidity and a world where authority was very important and where reserve was very important and protocol was very important, and these things were very constraining. And so I think that was a lot to do with the problems we were setting up, and that Geoffrey's character, who, I'm not saying that an Australian man of that generation wouldn't have his own reserves as well, or of any generation, but it is about one man trying to reach another man through these immensely thick layers of reserve. And I think language expressed that.
I know the director said it was as much about the silence as it was about the actual stammer and the way you spoke, that having the confidence to let the silence speak over it as well, to sort of understand some of those constraints.
Yes, well, silence, of course, is an extremely important component of this story, partly because I suppose the silence is the enemy at the beginning. Silence is the demon. It is the thing that this man drowns in. And if you have a stammer and you get blocked like that, that will become an abyss. It'll become something that you feel you will never climb out of. David Seidler, our writer who struggled with a stammer all his life, said it was like being underwater. It was that sense of panic. Now, I've said a million things about this film in interviews, but actually this has occurred to me for the first time in a way, and I think that what Geoffrey's character, what Lionel Logue is trying to do, rather than saying you will never experience a silence again, is converting them into something which is to your advantage, is to give them a grace and an elegance, and to, in a way, take them from being your enemy to making them your friend. So that towards the end, when you hear him speak, the silences aren't necessarily an abyss of sheer terror. They're a pause that you can manage. And when you listen to George VI speak, There are pauses, there are long pauses, but not all of them are glottal, sort of terrifying blocks. They're clearly decisions he's made.
Yes, I think having the confidence to allow the silence can actually be quite powerful in the end. Now, it's quite an interesting contrast to another recent film you've done, A Single Man, somebody who is so grief-stricken that he can barely speak as well. What was it like moving from one role to another?
Yes, I mean, I think that I think they're both men who are very, very lonely. They are isolated, but they've both written themselves off. It's quite an interesting thing that they've reached middle age and decided that there's no point in trying to better my life beyond this moment. But after that, it's a big departure, because I believe that the character in Single Man, when we're not experiencing his grief, he's a very functional person. I think he's, you know, we see him in his lecture hall, and he's capable of being pretty flamboyant with his students. He has a certain arrogance. I think he's a far more confident character. They're both witty men, I think, but the George of Single Man is capable of being patronizing and dismissive if he wants to be. He has a wryness and a sense of mischief. I think that Bertie, when we meet him in The King's Speech, is a much less self-assured individual. I think he is a man who would really rather live in the shadows. George is witnessed during one day of his life, in which he's decided that life must end. But they're both pulled back. They're both characters who get pulled back to life. George by various things, by life itself, I suppose, and being struck by the fact that when he sees things for the last time and says goodbye to them, they suddenly become vibrant. Because, you know, if you see something for the last time, in a way it's as if you're seeing it for the first time.
Now, you're here in Dubai at the moment. What are you most looking forward to this week? I know you're here for a few days. What's on your must-see list?
I have no idea. It's all a big, you know, unbelievable sort of kaleidoscope of surprises for me. The city's grown up in the last 15, 20 years, and
Just a little bit.
exactly. So it's all a kind of brand new adventure. I did not know what to expect. We arrived in darkness, and so I saw, you know, I was dazzled by the lights, and we had dinner last night up in that tower. Yes, and again, I mean, none of us could speak. We just sat there and gazed at this panorama, and then I woke up about 3 hours ago, you know, and the extraordinary sort of natural beauty of just this immense blue sky and water in a place where it's so peaceful, and you know, everything seems to reflect everything else. It's it really is a kind of unearthly experience.